Good morning. Yeah.
Everyone's name is a great
Can I, how do I get the link? No, that is Caroline. She's part of the community engagement team. Caroline, this is my father-in-law, Jeff.
Good to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you. I think we must have met before
Probably,
at church,
yeah.
but nice to see you again.
We come as often as we can when we're in town. Several good reasons. I'm sure you saw the picture that Terry did for us. Gave it to Sandy last night.
Yeah, I was there when she was making it, going, is this right? I'm like, I don't know.
But we gave it to Sandy last night. She's looking at it, and so, she's like, oh man, it's so good. And, just so she's, looking at it. And then Nicole had put in pictures of each of the weddings as part, so she's going through, and then, so this is like 90 seconds. She again goes back to the composite, and it's like, wait. How'd you do that?
Don't you remember when they all had a wedding on the same day?
Sweet. It was, it's like, you can, if you stare at it long enough, you go, oh, it's
Yeah.
like, but you have to, you have to be looking for a reason to not think that it's
Yeah, it's.
real, but it's fabulous.
She worked really hard on it.
Yep.
And I was like, I don't know if you're going to get it better than that. Like, the pictures weren't taken with this in mind, so.
Not at all. And it was, it's kind of like what I offered her. So I hope if she says yes, because I know it's nowhere near the type.
I'm sorry, did you let the ballot guy? No? I didn't know what to do. I thought, I knew he was with us at first. He started putting stuff out, and I was like, oh no. And he was like, I was like, yeah, he's there. So, cool thing, I found the tech apprenticeship company, and I got an email on it. So, see if we can get in there. Because they already run their own boot camps, but it's like, if you don't satisfy boot camp requirements.
And that you might, if you guys can get that connection,
Yeah.
you might want to use that as, in order to hit that, you've got to have a certain amount of in-person,
Potentially, yeah.
where I think you're trying to get more and more face-to-face, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a hard sell with, people with kids and stuff. I can understand that.
Yeah.
I can provide a shower here.
I think it's a
Me
great
in
vision.
and of myself.
How's everybody doing? Can you hear us? We're talking about you. Anybody who's on the live stream.
I didn't see. I don't see anyone but me and you online.
It looks like we have one concurrent viewer.
It is toasty.
You want me to?
I'm just doing on the Slang.
Bring your
I guess it's just not on Slang.
Yeah. So it might, as much as I want to keep that door open, maybe for the AC purposes.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
for sure. Well,
But I
maybe
just
we
wouldn't
wait
want-
until after people get here.
Yeah.
Or maybe.
Oh, we're not going to start until 9:30. I mean, I just started the live stream to make sure we're on time.
I just keep forgetting that we should be starting already. I'm like, I'm here at 9, there's no one here.
Did he tell you what any of these things are?
Only that there's a vegan gluten-free thing at the very back. That's the only thing I know. And
The two at the back are vegan and gluten free, is what he said.
He wrote it up for chocolate chip banana bread. And
How's work going for you?
It's going. I haven't been sleeping again, so I woke up this morning, I was like, if this continues, I might have to be excited to leave. You will always have to be here when I'm here, because I will be dead. But,
Not sleeping.
yeah, it was, so my sleep therapist put me back on the original schedule that was working, but it's been hard to get back into again, because she tried to move me back, trying to get to a normal time of going to sleep, and as soon as that happened, it started failing. It was only a 15-minute difference.
Oh man.
And she was like, maybe that was too aggressive. Maybe in a month we'll do like 5 minutes. And I was like, oh no, this is gonna take forever. Yeah, I have to supposed to go to bed at 1:30 now.
So you just need a West Coast job when you wake up.
Yeah, that would be great. She was like, she's like, so last week she diagnosed me with, I have insomnia, I have a erratic circadian rhythm, and I have hypersomnia. Right.
Hypersomnia?
Yeah, she was like, she's like, I get the feeling based on your sleep data, you're a person who's not going to feel good until you've slept like 12 hours. But the best we can do is 7. So you're always going to feel really bad. So, just that guy to the book.
Hello, miracle worker. We gave Sandy the picture last night, and Nicole had put in like the actual pictures of the weddings, with it.
This is where you get the inside baseball.
Saw the like deposit. Oh man, that's so great.
How are you
Then
doing?
it went back to
Feeling
the
better?
So much better. I finished my steroid and
Came back down to the
antibiotic schedule.
Yeah, because last week you seemed like you were in a good mood, and then like, after everyone left, I was like,
So-
hey, John, yeah. You're just like,
It
what?
was-
I was like, okay.
So, but yeah.
It was like, you like crashed, you can't do it anymore.
We get great family memories.
My energy is drained. Yeah, we'll see what we can do.
So have you tried the baseball bat method?
Or someone just smacked me in the
Yeah,
face.
it's like, okay, instead of go man, smack,
It only works a few times, I hear. And then you become unable to do anything but sleep.
And I imagine medications are like totally counter.
Yeah, it depends on, so like, there's a few that they said will work, but they don't like to prescribe them anymore because, like, it's like Ambien is what they keep bringing up, and they say, but if you take Ambien, you're basically like a heroin addict. Like, you would just only want to sleep, and you will do whatever it takes. Like, they're like, we have soccer moms who are like selling all of their children's stuff to get more Ambien, like on the street, so they can go to bed. Because it's that addictive. So they're like, we just really don't want to ever prescribe that unless like you're going to die because you're not sleeping.
Well, I would definitely keep that in prayers when we remember you guys, because it's just.
For 3 weeks it was working good until she changed me over to the new. Hello.
Mm.
And last night doesn't really count, because our friends stayed over until like 2.
You're yeah. It's like, oh no, I've missed my bedtime. It's gonna be a bad day tomorrow. Because I was like, oh, don't go yet, because I have to stay until 1:30. And then I was like,
Dustin also has a computer.
yes, I brought this snack for you.
So they said update with the hard drive, so.
That's what I figured. That's not a good problem to have on your Mac because it's a Mac. Even after. The moment I think of where everyone needs to get out. For that, no one cares.
Did you see that gluten-free, both are gluten-free?
No, we're not vegan, but we can't have dairy, so vegan's a good bet.
Do you want to try? You guys should try the ones that they brought.
Yeah, they brought some gluten-free.
They brought some vegan and gluten-free.
I'm not. peach muffin.
Yeah.
It's very good.
So is that just or something? Okay, good.
You got peach muffin with no dairy.
Now, what's the battery in that?
Sorry?
It should show you a battery percentage. Okay. Do you have a power cord for it?
I have a power cord for that, but I just want to make sure.
Okay.
Do you want any more? Okay.
Well, however you want to take notes, and then I think, do you have Visual Studio Code on this one?
Take command space and search for Visual Studio Code.
Pull up that spotlight.
This is
I don't.
excellent.
You're gonna need to go
What
down
is
to
it?
the studio code.
Croissant.
Oh, yeah.
Chocolate.
So, I'm gonna go ahead and go real quick, or if you could go to that store real quick. let me
So,
go check.
yeah, go to just search for Visual Studio Code and it's probably you
I don't think there's gonna be.
Yeah, that's the other thing. It's like people aren't gonna eat all of those, are they?
No, so maybe just take it any way you want.
Okay, that's fair.
I know. Raven, she's out of town.
Raven's out of town. What about Larissa?
She should be.
Yeah, it's gonna be.
She should be here? Okay.
Little things for you, but just keep typing. No, it's not working. No, it's not working.
Probably shouldn't show my email on the live stream. But it looks like we have some folks joining us already in the live chat, so welcome.
They would be surprised at those big companies that don't, and then you have to trick Mac into opening it.
No, you don't. You just have to very explicitly say, I want this program to open. It's like
Oh, yes, but
4 to
you
5
But
clicks.
now you have to use the terminal, because they've removed the
Oh, you're kidding.
friendly option.
Oh, you're kidding.
Nope. If you don't code sign, you don't get to open it unless you really know what you're doing. Because they're like, this is the agent in Mac will lie to you. Now, it just says this app's broken.
You can't use this, yeah.
And I'm like, no, it's not. I built this app. I know it's not broken.
Worked on the previous app, or previous
So
Mac.
this just needs just to these tabs. It's just a tab with latest information. So you can click X. You can open a new file. Wait for the files.
How's your trip?
Uneventful. Yeah.
So we're gonna get started in about 5 minutes, I think. I'm gonna go use the restroom real quick and then we'll get started.
What are you? Just so I know for the future, which ones are the ones here? Back left. Back left? Closest to the window.
We haven't started yet.
Aw, don't do that to yourself.
4 minutes.
All right. Welcome to part 2. Last week, let me pull up what we did last week. So last week we learned a little bit about saying hello to the world. We put together an HTML page with a little tiny JavaScript program in it. And we learned how to style a little bit with CSS. So today we're going to return to this program and add a little bit more functionality to it. But mostly we're just going to clean it up and make it easier to read and change and test. We're not going to get into testing frameworks or anything, but Dustin in chat to answer questions. So that was a little quick review. Does everybody... So take another couple minutes. I know we did this last week to introduce yourself. Just, thing you like to do outside of work. Who you are, what your name is, and just kind of a little bit about yourself. About 2 minutes. So we'll start with you.
Larissa, Miss Larissa, I don't know, what do I say?
What do you do for work now?
Work with ethics, accounting, and take care of the finances of transportation company.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm really happy and applying something new, and I was trying to learn how to go in 11th class,
Mm-hmm.
and that was awesome.
What do you like to do outside of work?
I'm sorry?
What do you like to do outside of work?
I like to work out.
Okay.
CrossFit. I used to do CrossFit.
Okay.
Since I was in but I love it. I love especially stressful days, heavy cardio. Yeah, I like to read and I also like to learn new things.
Nice.
New shots and things.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I just got a new apartment.
Oh, congratulations. Yay.
Yeah.
Who's next? Okay.
My name is Alon. I am in the hospitality industry and I'm also a personal assistant. What I like to do for fun outside of work is I like to roller skate, dancing, ride on a motorcycle. I have 5 kids.
Oh, wow.
My oldest is 23 and the youngest is 27 twins starting now.
Oh, wow.
And just want to
Wait, and you still have free time?
No, I make everyone knows it's mommy's time. Just a certain day at a certain time.
That's good, yeah.
Leave me alone. Make that a priority. I want to get into coding just because it's just something new that I really want to learn and kind of switch over into the tech hospitality industry.
Okay. Cool.
I'm Sarah. I used to be a graphic designer and then I left my job for like the 3rd time because I don't like graphic design. And I haven't been working since. And then, yeah, I like to play like D&D and I like to work out. I just started taking gymnastics classes, which is fun. And that's me.
Cool. Yeah. That's okay. You can still introduce yourself.
Wait, now that you said
That's a wide array.
All numbers.
It's just math.
You just passed, exactly.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm Caroline.
Uh-huh.
I am a data analyst for a smaller company under Southern Company Gas. I also don't love my job. I'm not taking this class because I have a degree in it and I didn't like it then either. Yeah.
You have 2 dogs?
I have 2 dogs, big girls.
Mm.
And currently I have 3 actually. I'm taking care of Raven's dog. She's at my house, or he is at my house for a couple days, and I don't want to code for a living. Doesn't mean you shouldn't. It's just not for me. It's not for me.
Good to know you.
It is good to know me. I know I don't want to code. Not a lot. Honestly, I don't have a ton of free time. I work on this and take care of my house. We just bought our house in January, and that takes a lot of time, unfortunately. I'm in a Bible study with some friends from college that takes up a lot of my time too.
Mm.
Love it. That's actually what I work on when you guys are doing your things. Bible study. That's kind of it. I do a lot of driving because I work in Midtown.
And you're based out of Woodstock right now? Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. That's like about the same drive that I'm doing.
That's how you get out of hospitality.
I get that.
Get that commute cut down, right?
When I was in college, I used to, I think 4 hours in my day, just traffic, just going home. And now I live 2 minutes away from the office.
It's so nice. It's so nice.
Almost like across the street.
Yeah, you could walk if you had to.
I'm Jeff, and I'm the tech services manager at a nonprofit organization called Apartment Life. I love my job. I left a job that I absolutely hated about 4 years ago. So I do a lot of pseudo coding and work with the guy who does real coding. So I'm here for one day only because the things I like to do in my free time are play with his kids because they're my grandkids.
Right.
And they're 5 and his 5 nieces and nephews. So we're up here visiting family. So I thought I'd see whether this guy's worth your guys' time.
So he's auditing today. He's my father-in-law. So obviously, I apologize to the people on the live stream. This is not super useful to you, but I just wanted to share that it's a great time to get together and just get to know each other because you'll be working through these lessons and coding exercises together. And when you're together, you can kind of like share in each other's successes and triumph over the frustrations together and help each other out. So it's really helpful to kind of be in person if you're able. I understand there's a lot of reasons why you can't be, like, you have 2 9-year-old twins and getting care for them set up is a hassle, I'm sure. But we really appreciate you being here, Alon, and the rest of y'all for being here. And it's just a really good time. And next week, for those that are remote, we will just take some time to allow those that are remote to introduce themselves.
Who are you?
Oh, my name is Jonathan. If you didn't catch it last week, I am a software engineer at Hotel Effectiveness. I write code that helps hotels manage their costs. And that is what I do during the day for the work week. And then after work, I like to play video games with my wife. And I used to run. I haven't gotten back into that since I've had my boys. Been trying to figure out a schedule that allows me to run. Yeah, got to get it in early. Yeah, so yeah, and yeah, we're just working we're just working on raising our kids right now. They're very little, but I hear 2 is when they start getting able to play together. So that'll be fun. So yeah, I love computers too. I love to tinker with computers outside of my work, which is a little, I kind of get a lot of computer time, let's say. So yeah, that's me. If you didn't know, I'm a father of twins, and my wife and I live in Marietta, Georgia. Got our other instructor here. He's going to introduce himself.
I'm Dustin, and I am a mobile software engineer for Home Depot's Home Depot. They're named Site One. I make Android and iOS applications that allow them to easily find things on their massive campuses and do point of sale to large construction companies. My free time, I like to design games of all sorts, and teach myself the necessary skills to program video games and make art for them, although that is kind of slow today. That's about it.
Yeah. And again, I apologize to the folks who are remote. We'll take some time next week to do this same exercise remotely, and I'll read out your introductions from Slack. So feel free to, I'll set up a channel to post those at some point. So what we're going to be learning today, we're going to look at some short-term professional development options. So there's plenty of IT certifications that you can pursue now that will make you more valuable to an employer. Obviously, we're working towards certification with Free Code Camp. That's going to be very useful. But there are some junior developer positions that allow you to write code that doesn't require deployment in the same way that you would normally deploy code. So I'll go over those in the next slide. Just a fair number of platforms that are in use by several Fortune 500 and other companies that allows you to write code on a platform. We'll look a little bit about how to use GitHub and Git to make version-controlled changes. That's going to be a light touch. We're not going to spend too much time on that. I just want you to be aware of Git and GitHub and what it does. So feel free to follow along with that if you want to. Otherwise, we'll just make it a demo to show you what you can do with it. And then we're going to make a couple of changes to our app. We're going to change the layout to make it look a little nicer. We're going to refactor or change the code to use functions. By the way, when I say refactor, what that means is to change the code around to be more readable, more testable, more pretty, right? It's a fancy way of a programmer saying, I'm going to clean up my code and make it look nicer. And then we'll look at adding names to the page for a virtual guest book. So that'll be a new feature of our Hello World application. So professional development. I want to talk a little bit about how I started. If you all didn't hear this last week, I started touching point-of-sale computers and testing them back in 2011. I was 18 or 19 at the time, and I worked my way up through Radiant Systems, then NCR when they got bought. When Radiant Systems was bought out by NCR, I worked up through NCR's ranks. And I didn't ask permission to write software, I just kind of wrote software. But I also was pursuing IT certification at the time because I knew I wanted to work with computers at that time, and I didn't have a good starting point necessarily, so I'm going to try and sort of give you an idea of what the starting points will and should be for a new IT career. And IT and software to me are almost interchangeable because it's all about managing change through software systems, right? So you'll change a software system, but if it's a live website, like if someone changed Facebook.com out of the blue, that's happened in the past, right? YouTube or Facebook have changed their look and feel, and you don't know where anything is anymore. They do that more in a focus tested way. So some people have seen that, but you see it for the first time when they go live. It's the same way with any enterprise IT software system. You can't just change something out of the blue. You got to test it. You got to make sure it's going to work and be backwards compatible so that people who are still doing work in the enterprise can continue to do their work when you make a change. So in that case, IT and software engineering are kind of similar. So it's useful to look at IT jobs and not just software jobs. Starting small is where I started, right? So I was literally, so Alon, you're in the hospitality industry. You know how you use your point of sale. I was the one who was testing those. So we would repair them at our depot, and I would test the touch monitor at several points, and then run a test MSR card through it, magnetic stripe. So it's like a test credit card, and that was where I started. And it took a long time, but I learned a lot and was learning constantly throughout that time as a test technician. So when you're looking at jobs, don't be afraid to look at a call center. Don't be afraid to look at a QA engineer position. Don't be afraid to look at a systems analyst position. That's a little bit different than a software engineer, but it does get you involved in the creation of software sooner. And a lot of times people end up in project management after they've spent some time in software development anyway. So be aware that that's an option as well. And I don't want to say this lightly, but if you are not in a field, you may have to take a pay cut to get the experience necessary. I don't want anyone to sell themselves short, especially now. The tech field is in demand, right? So there's lots of unfilled jobs. So do not sell yourself short, but consider maybe a career in QA to start, right? But don't sell yourself short either, because there's been a lot of good unionization efforts as well to make it so you're not working 12 hours a day doing QA, right? So be aware you are a valuable employee regardless of what your company pays you, but you may have to lower that expectation of salary or compensation to get your foot in the door. And also, certifications plus schooling will get you noticed. I didn't put Western Governors University on here. That's my alma mater. It's a school for professionals. It's Western Governors University. So if you're in a field and you just need to tick that box that says, yes, I'm educated, it's a great option. You can do it self-paced. You can fit in as many credits as you can complete. And it's competency based. So you just you prep for a test, you take a test, you pass the course. It is currently a great way to get an accredited education online. I haven't seen, whoops.
Yeah, just keep doing that, it's fine.
Okay. It is a great way to tick that degree box if you need it. I would worry about that much further down in the future if you start working in a QA position or a NOC, Network Operations Center position. You'll start seeing people with that degree, or it's kind of like a DeVry. I don't even know if DeVry is still around. I'm out of touch on DeVry. I knew someone who taught at DeVry. He helped me with I was 12 or 13, and he helped me with my chess program in C#, and that was really cool. But certifications in AWS is in very high demand right now. Salesforce is a CRM platform that you can write JavaScript and HTML for. CRM means Customer Relationship Management. So when a salesperson contacts you, they want to know all your information and have it in a single source, so that when the sales team gets a call from that same person saying, hey, I'm ready to buy, they have all the information from that conversation that the initial salesperson had. So that's a database of interactions.
A ginormous contacts book.
Yes.
With more.
It is the source of truth for a sales team. So it is very important for sales companies to be able to have all that information.
And HubSpot is better than Salesforce.
Right, so HubSpot is down here as well. I don't think there is as much certification options for HubSpot, but you can write code for HubSpot. I think you can be a HubSpot certified administrator at least. ServiceNow is an IT service management platform. So when you have a data center with computers, you have to keep track of all the information about those computers. So you'll have a database of what programs are installed where they are physically located in a data center maybe. You might have service tickets and service orders that go through that system, so you install new software on the servers and stuff like that. So ServiceNow is a platform I worked with for about 6 months. It's a great starting point for JavaScript developers because the barrier to entry is pretty low. You can get certified by just studying for and taking a test. You can be a certified administrator and a certified developer. And there's a whole career path around ServiceNow. That is a big industry. At least I was able to see it. But that's going to be in the IT service management industry. By the way, if you can get into a managed service provider job as a call center technician or a network technician, you're going to have a lot of downtime to learn code. Not saying time theft is a good thing. A lot of employers will say time theft is a thing. But if you're not able to do any useful work for your employer at that point, might as well skill up. Yeah, might as well learn some skills that can help them. And that's a great place to talk about deploying software and writing software that can help the company do the work it needs to. So Google Cloud and Azure are the other two big cloud providers. And I want to try and demystify the cloud a little bit. The cloud is just other people's computers, right? So they just sit in a data center somewhere, and then you order CPUs or RAM from them. You just say, I want to use this much RAM and this much CPU for this much time. This much storage for this much time.
Or you say, I need some, but I'm not sure how much you take care of it.
Yeah.
And they'll continually ramp you up and charge you a whole lot.
Yeah.
If you need a lot.
So if you want to get started in the cloud, there's a pretty generous year-long free tier. I wouldn't start that until you're ready to pursue certification with AWS. But personally, that's been one of the biggest boosts to my career is an AWS certification. Before I graduated college, I got AWS certified, and that significantly ramped up my recruitability on LinkedIn.
And in Atlanta, at least, Azure is really big, and you can use the free tier of Azure as well. I don't know if there's a limit on that.
There are limits.
No, there's like data limits. I don't know if there's a limit to how long you can have it. I think with Azure, at least when I started using it, you got a limit every month, and it would be renewed.
Like a credit every month. Yeah.
It was very small and very slow. It's very painful to work with that way, but you can learn.
And you do need a credit card, and there are risks of charges that can be excessive. So tread with care when you're using AWS. Any cloud provider really.
Yeah.
There are cost calculators out there. I can see if I can track down a couple for use, but they'll calculate how much something is going to cost when you try to do it. So that's my spiel about milestones that are a little bit closer than I'm a coder now and have been for 5 years or so, something like that. So, all right. Communication. Last week we talked about communication being key. So knowing how the program works is not as important as being able to communicate how the program works. So that's what we're communicating. We're communicating what the program's doing when it runs, how to change it, what should be changed and what's possible, how to keep it running. And one way to keep track of all of that is with GitHub, right? So GitHub is kind of like a database of changes. I'll pull up the repository. So repository just means the database of code, right? So a source control repository. Source means the program code that runs the program. You might have, it's a little more obvious when it's like you have to run a build process to run a program. So in some coding languages, you have to run a step before you can run the program. It doesn't just run the code from the text. You'll have to do a build step. In the case of HTML, we just run it in the browser and it doesn't need a build step. But this is still source code. all of these lines of text constitute the program we ran last week. So with a source control repository, you can store that text and the changes made to it over time. I'll illustrate what that means in a second.
Can we see how you got to here within GitHub?
Yes, so I posted a link to this right here. And this is basically the directory of our source code files. So when I open up the directory in Visual Studio Code, you'll see I have index.html and readme.md. I added this markdown file, and markdown is like HTML, but not. We'll get to markdown later. But these files are linked to this repository on my computer now. So I can make changes and push them to this website here. And GitHub is a free website. Well, you can sign up for free. You can also pay for stuff if you want to.
Yes.
But it's a way to track the software changes. So in a lot of cases, when you work at a company, they're either going to use GitHub or Bitbucket or some other website that has source control features. So this is a way that they can track changes over time to their programs.
And have backups.
Yes, yeah. So in the case of, say you're working on some code on an airplane and the airplane sucks your laptop, like somebody opens a window in the airplane and your laptop gets sucked out. If you were able to push those changes up to the server before it got sucked out the window, you'd have a backup of what you were working on. And it's very easy, relatively speaking, to make that connection. It's still a little bit more complicated than just dragging it and dropping it somewhere, but a little bit of terminal shouldn't hurt. But when I say terminal, I mean the command line. So let's go ahead and illustrate what Git does. So let's say I want to change the color of the Hello World ID. And this isn't a good example because this isn't going to show up. So let's not change the Hello World ID. So what if we want it to be Burleywood? For those of you that were doing the lessons, I learned about Burleywood when I was doing the CSS coffee menu. But that's a very interesting kind of muted wood color. So now we've changed that. I can reveal it in my File Explorer, double click it, and now it's Burleywood. And our program is still intact. It says, "Hello, Jonathan. Welcome to my program. Would you like to play a game?" It looks kind of pink on this monitor. I think on the live stream it should look okay.
Yeah, it looks like a light brown.
All right. Whoops. I closed out the GitHub. Okay, so right now we're out of sync with this repository. So I have changes on my local machine that are not here, right? So the color still says red here. So to change it for everybody, right? So GitHub is a way to share code with everybody. So y'all can go here and if you click this fork button and you're signed in, it'll create a copy of this repository to your account. And then you can make changes in isolation. And we're not stepping on each other when we make changes, right? So if I made it Burleywood and somebody else made it purple, there would be a conflict when we tried to bring it all together into one branch. And that's the other thing. Branch is a term that is used in Git constantly. And a branch is a separate code repository, but it's the same. So here's what I mean by that. Git is made up of what's called commits. So if I had a whiteboard, I'd illustrate it by having little circles. So each one of these circles represents commits, and then it's a linked list, right? So you have links between the commits. So you have a circle here, and then you'll have a line going this way. And each commit makes a little circle and a little line going to it. I can pull up an illustration of it.
Do you have a
DAG illustration.
Or they have illustration?
Git. Do I have illustrations?
So do you have like source tree or
I don't.
or-
I don't have a source tree. I do have.
Is it gonna show
Wait,
you
this
in here?
should
I
be.
didn't know. So when you create a new repository in GitHub or any other source control, there's going to be something called the master or main branch. That is where all of your code lives at first. But if you're working in a team of people and you don't want to step on each other's toes, someone will take a copy of master, name it something else, and will fork off at a certain branch of time. That's called a branch, you'll call it something. You'll do your code changes in there, run parallel. Meanwhile, the master branch is over here untouched. When you're done, and usually you push your code up and someone who's in charge, like someone who's like a senior developer will look over that and say, okay, I think this is good, and then they will put it back into the master branch. That way you avoid just making changes and potentially messing up software that is really mature and has lots of things. Because if you're just making a small program like we are, it doesn't make that much sense to do this. But if you have a huge program, it could be devastating if you accidentally put something in there that's not correct. So all this is usually used for teamwork, so that people can easily work on different things and then have a good way of approving what gets put back into the main software.
So we'll simulate a pull request. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I pulled up a project that I was working on with Kara, if that would be a helpful illustration, it's got a bunch of branches.
I don't know how I'm gonna view that.
What
very
is
easily.
what is the project in? No, what were you coding in?
It was like, I think it was just like putting in that, so you can't pull up.
So I think everyone's thoroughly lost at this point. So this is the illustration up on the screen right now. So those little circles represent commits, and those are snapshots in time of the changes made to the program. So right now, our little program only has this C1. The common ancestor is only one commit. So let me make a branch. I really wish it would work in VS Code, because there's some really good tools in VS Code, but it doesn't seem to want to work. So if I select this folder and it reopens. Right. So when you install Git, you can type git status in a Git repository directory. Just bear with me and hit the believe button with me. Just say, yes, this is how it's going to work. Yeah. So when you run it in a Git directory, you'll see this says modified index HTML. And if I run git diff, I'll see what changed, right? So see this minus in the color? See where it says color red? This minus means I removed this line and then added this line. So that represents my change. So if I want to add this change to my branch in GitHub, what I need to do is commit to the branch. So if I want to commit it, I have to do git. First of all, you have to add the files you want to commit. So Git does things a little differently to some other source control mechanisms. You have to stage your files before you commit them. So it's like, it tracks all your changes, but you have to be really sure you want to commit something. So you have to add all the files manually. If Visual Studio Code would behave, I could show you how easy it is just to, here's one change.
I would just download a fork. It takes a couple seconds.
Download fork.
And just so you know, learning this command line it can be a good thing to do. Most companies that I work for strongly persuade you not to do that, because it is a lot easier to make mistakes than it is to use one of these visual programs that visualize your Git.
So I'm going to post this in the Slack channel.
And fork is the one
Okay. So the reason why I'm spending so much time on this is an essential piece of any developer's daily anything. You are going to spend a lot of time with Git. Once you've coded everything, you have to put it up where everyone can see it and you can communicate what's going to be changed. And then people will approve those changes or ask for changes to those changes, right? So you might one very prominent practice is called code review. So it's where you look at code and say, okay, what's changed? Is this doing what the company needs? And will it break anything? Those are the three kind of things that they're looking for. There's a fourth optional and recommended thing is, does it conform to style guidelines for the code? That's something you can worry about much later on down the line. So I've just installed Git fork. And I'm going to go ahead and just type in my name, my email, and I like to work out of documents, projects.
It's just much slower than I thought the download was going to go.
Well, I'm running a live stream too, so that can't help things.
Oh, okay.
But the way to do it via the command line is to add your changes to the staging area is to type git add and then the file you've changed. You can also include an entire directory's worth of changes by just doing git add dot. Right? So because we only have one file that changed and it's the only one in the directory, I'm just going to do a directory add since it saves keystrokes. Then you can do a git status and you'll see it change from red to green and it says these are the changes to be committed. So the Burleywood change is ready to be committed. So to commit, you type git commit -m and then you can type a message describing your changes. So in this case, we add or change color to Burleywood. So that's what this change does, is it changes the color.
What does the N mean?
That is a command line option that says message.
Oh, that just means you want to add a message
Yes.
about like what your changes that you made.
Correct. If you're committing without a message, it's going to be very hard in the future to see what is what.
You should always commit with a message.
Never commit without a message. That's why I didn't even bother trying to show a commit without a message.
Is there other letters other than M, or is N the only one?
There you go. There are so many command line options. Complex program.
Can you just Google it and say like?
You can,
commit
yes.
Options. Commit.
Yeah.
What do you call it?
Command line options.
Commit command line options.
Yes.
You just Google it.
Yep.
Cool.
So if you commit your changes and I have a branch that I've created, is there a way to pass your changes to my branch?
Yes, let me demonstrate branching real quick. Let me open up Fork. This will be a lot easier with a visual UI. So let me open up the SoftGuild repository. So now you can see the line, right? Let me make this bigger. Does it work? Can I zoom? Yes. Okay, you see this yellow line here? These are the commits. So this was when I first added it yesterday. Then I added a README, and then I changed the color to Burleywood. So now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new branch, and we're going to call this feature change layout. And I'm going to hit checkout after create. So when you create a branch, you got to check out to it afterwards. So checkout just means you're going to start committing to this other branch. So by default, you're going to start on master or main. And when you're on master or main, every commit you make is going to move this line forward, the yellow line forward. When you create a new branch, it's going to be a different color. and it's going to be a different branch. So it's going to look like a little tree. So you're going to have a little branch off of that top commit there. And we'll illustrate that once we create it. So I hit create and check out. Now I've got a new branch. So you'll see that it still refers to that first commit at the top. So when I make new commits though, it's gonna branch out. Right. So let me go to Visual Studio Code. And how did you all find the exercises this week? Any trouble? You got stuck a little bit? Okay. So when you get stuck, that's what the Slack channel is for. We can sort of work through the problem and guide you in the right direction. So we're going to hopefully add a couple more people who are able to. Good. That's one thing you'll need as a software developer is a little bit of, you know.
But if you are ever so stuck that you just don't know what the next step is, I've been monitoring the chat. Nothing has happened.
Yeah.
So I will be there hopefully to answer questions.
Yeah, and I do have a button say ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
So when you try a lot of times, so like, okay, I'm done. Ask for help. And then they say something and it's like, are you sure? I'm like, I guess I'm gonna keep trying. Cancel.
Have you like looked at their forums very much? The like forum that you can ask for help on, because a lot of questions have like already been asked on their forum.
Oh, it's like Stack Overflow.
Yeah. I had to look at that. They didn't have the answer that I was looking for, but they had a lot of other like related things.
Mm-hmm. Were you still trying to add the stuff to the page?
It was like I just got confused by their wording for like what I had to do.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was with me too.
Yeah, it was like the one with the hyperlink where it was like only these words, but like I kept doing it wrong.
One thing too is they asked me to write something and then put the first letter and then created a mistake.
Yep.
Oh
Because it's a lot more particular than the actual programming will be, because they have to check your work, and they don't have an easy way of doing that. So if you're slightly off, they're like, no, that's wrong.
Yeah. When you're programming for people and not computers, you're going to have a lot more leeway with what you capitalize and what you don't. But in the free code camp lessons, as you're going through, like step by step, it definitely will tell you exactly, like I just copy and paste most times.
Yeah.
So the content, you can copy and paste.
Yeah, but also the beginning usually shows you how to do it, and eventually it just kind of tells you so you can figure it out.
Yeah.
So that's what my issue was: element, value, attribute.
Yeah,
I
attributes,
had to figure
elements.
out how to put that now because
Yeah.
they were not showing me.
Right. Okay, so now I'm on this new branch, and we're going to change the layout a little bit. So I'm going to talk a little bit about layout. Let me pull up the next slide. So that's what GitHub is. It allows developers to share and collaborate. You're going to use Git or another source control method a lot, so be aware that source control is a concept and be willing to learn more about it. I think Free Code Camp has some Git lessons, but it's much further down in the certification paths. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about CSS layouts, and we'll try and get into Grid and Flexbox a little bit. That's a modern standard to lay out your web pages. So it used to be there's an element in HTML called a table, and it's just a table like Excel. And that was how HTML was done for a very long time. Eventually we decided that was bad and made a table with Grid and Flexbox. I'm a back-end engineer, so I don't have a lot of experience with CSS, so I might get a little curmudgeon-y when you bring it up. But it is a very useful skill to have, and there are some people who can do amazing things with CSS. So if anyone tells you you can't code because you know CSS and HTML, tell them they're wrong, and then show them a nice, pretty animation you can make with CSS, because there's a lot of really cool stuff. You can do so many things with CSS. Just go to codepen.io and look at the examples of things you can do with CSS. It's crazy. In fact, if we have a little bit of time, I'll go ahead and pull some examples up. So these are some things you can make with CSS. Right, so here's this little Grim Reaper heading towards someone with a deadline.
And I want to stress that the animation that you just saw is insane. It isn't easy to do this with CSS, but you can.
Someone made the Star Wars opening crawl in CSS. And this,
You guys music.
there's audio too. Crazy.
It's the whole movie. They just use the video tag.
All right, well, before we get copyright strike, I'm gonna get out of there. You know, like here's a floating animation that will like, this is a more simple animation.
Yes.
It's like moving it up and down slightly. And they're doing gradients here, so you'll notice that there's a gradient.
Unless they made that image with CSS, then this is doable.
Yeah, no, they're using it at
Okay.
source. Yeah. So CSS is really cool. You can also do web page layouts with it, right? That's what I use it for because I make boring web pages. So let me go back to Visual Studio Code, and we'll create a body selector. So everything. A bitty. Gotta find the O key. Okay. So we're gonna change the display to inline. I have an illustration of what inline versus inline block means. But basically inline will allow content to flow left to right and then wrap downwards. Whereas block takes up the whole width of the screen and just goes downwards. So the div element, did you all use the div element in the exercises this week? Say what?
She wasn't, I don't know.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. That's one thing that we'll have to work on, I think. Okay, but the div elements are block by default. And so P elements are also blocks by default. So they'll take up the whole width of the screen. So you'll see how normally when you're writing text, it just goes left to right. This is going down when you add a new element. So when I refresh this page, what I expect to happen, it did not happen because I did not select the P tag. So CSS, remember, cascades. So if I choose the body and there's an element inside the body that's different and behaves differently, it's going to take that behavior over the one that's above it. Right? So I have a body here, but then I have P tags in here, in the middle. The P tags are going to keep their attributes if I override something in the body. So I made the body display inline. What I need to do to make this work is copy this line down here, remove the comment, and now what I expect to happen is that hello world and that not red will be right next to each other instead of just going straight down. So let me refresh. So you'll see they're now next to each other. Okay, so the new way of doing things in CSS3 is with flex and grid. Grid is like a table. You can have columns and rows, and it tries to figure out the spacing in between them. right? And you can set variables like how much spacing there should be between them. It basically allows you to draw a really good table. That's CSS Grid. Flex just works on one row, right? So it sort of does the inline thing where it goes left to right and then wraps downwards, but it also is smart enough to understand when an element would flow, like if it's halfway off the screen, and it's flowing halfway off the screen, it's going to move it to the next line instead of trying to force it to fit on that one line. So let me just see if I can illustrate that really quick. And I'm going to cheat a little bit and go to W3 Schools and find the Flexbox section. Flexible box. So you'll see this illustration here. And W3 Schools is actually really good for this because it's kind of like Free Code Camp. You can do HTML and CSS over here on the left, and on the right you're able to change the way it looks. So if I do this, you'll see how the boxes are shrinking. If I change this to not wrap, or if I remove the no wrap and hit run, what's going to happen now when I do this is it'll flow to the next line. Or it should. Yeah, I set it to wrap. Oops. I hit run.
I think no wrap is the default. They just throw it out for some reason.
All right, I'm going to hit run. And now you'll see as I move the screen, it flows down. And this is useful because back in the day, it used to be just 800 by 600 monitors, right? So you'd have square monitors sitting on a desk. Now we have widescreen monitors sitting on a desk. So you also have a phone, right? So when you view websites on a phone, you expect it to look okay. Flex sort of helps with that. So when you squash down to a phone size, let's say, you want to be able to see all the content. So you can wrap or you can no wrap, right? And no wrap will just shrink the content. I gotta stop hitting Control S because it brings up that dialog. And I'm sort of combining lessons as we go because I still haven't done the pull requests. But I just wanted to have an example of something to do with Git, because Git is just a tool underneath your code. If you're not writing code, Git is kind of useless. So that's why I moved to the Flexbox tutorial. So you'll notice I added back this, well actually, let me make sure people can see this. That's probably useful. So you'll see this flex wrap property. I changed that to wrap, and that's when it was wrapping and flowing down to the next line. So now it's not going to wrap, so it's just going to shrink the content when I shrink the window. So obviously you probably don't want to use that. And again, designing a responsive web page is hard. Designing a web page that will look good on a desktop and on a phone is pretty hard. So these tools will help you to build out a flexible and responsive design for phone and desktop. So that's Flexbox. We also have Grid. Never seen Grid? Came out recently. In the past 5 to 8 years, I think.
Okay. Yeah, they did not go over it when I was learning this.
Yeah.
The Flexbox was.
So you'll see it kind of shrink the content too. You can also have, I think it's column, there's space between the columns. CSS grid. Grid column gap. So you'll see this property here, grid column gap. We can have it be big or we can have it be small. But we can go ahead and put the grid column, what was it, grid column map? Gap. And we'll set it to 20 pixels. I'm in the wrong page. I'm in this page. We'll run that, and you'll see now the column spacing is different, and I think you can do row column gap, or grid row gap as well. And we'll set that to 10 pixels. So yeah, that allows you to sort of lay out. So what this is useful for is if you have like an image gallery, you can have each one of these be images in your gallery. And as you, shrink and grow the page, it'll, shrink and grow the photos, which you may not want. So in that case, there's ways to make it so the content doesn't shrink. It just flows to the next line. So that's a sort of quick demo about CSS layouts. There's a lot more we could go into on this, and we will later on, but I just wanted you to be aware this existed. What I'm going to do with our program is center the two elements, which may take longer than just doing a table, because centering a div is really hard. Probably should have had this ready to go. This is problem solving live, so we have p tags. So let's make a div and call this give it a class of centered container. Centered container. And I want the p tags to be between this. Control Shift F. Whoop. Control Alt F. Right?
So he's trying to get it to auto format.
Yeah. So Shift Alt F. There you go. I'm a little picky when it comes to that.
You should be. You should be, because you should have clean looking code. It should be formatted in a way that makes it easy for other people to read, not just you.
Oh, there's an easy way to do this with Flex.
That's what I was going to say. If you don't know, I know this one.
Do you? Do you wanna help out? Because it's display flex, and then you do justify content center. Center.
Look at that.
It's also okay to write the code how it makes sense to you and then go back and format it while you're still learning.
Oh, absolutely.
Totally.
But if you're working with a team in the future, it's good to make sure you're following their standards.
Correct.
Yes. So again, so now we have centered content here. So now our hello world is up top and not red is below. So that's because those are still block level elements and they're going to take up the entirety of the screen. But because we're justifying the content to the center, all the words are going to show up in the center. And you can justify content to the right, you can justify content, do it at the container beginning, container end, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of different properties that you can use for justify content to lay out your content. So yeah, that's that. So now we have some changes we need to commit. So let's go back to git fork and let's see our local changes. So you'll notice that this is similar to what I was showing in the terminal when I did that git diff command. So what this is called is a diff. It shows the differences between what's changed on your machine and what the last commit was.
This is a diff.
Diff, D-I-F-F.
As in a difference.
Yeah, a differential or a difference. So as you can see, I've added a body style selector, and I've added a centered container around the hello world and not red elements.
Yep.
And I've removed these two lines. So while I didn't technically remove those two lines, I did move them. So it kind of looks like I removed them. So you'll see the red is like minus. You subtracted those two lines.
They're not in the same place, at least.
Yes, they are not in the same place. So now to make this commit, you hit stage, okay? And now I have some staged changes for commit.
And this line right here is like that.
This is like the message right here, this commit subject piece down here. So in this case, what did we do? And this is where you want to break up your commits into as small a change as you can make it, because it's kind of hard to describe what we just did. There's a high level way we can say this, because we add, this commit adds a centered container.
There's so many commits I have that just say refactor.
I hope you squash those. Add centered container. And this description field allows you to add more details about what you changed. So in this case, we add flex to body, justify content to the center, created main div in h1 tag. And that's it. So that's a list of items we did, but the centered container is the subject of the commit, right? That's what people are going to see. That's what you're going to see in, if I go back to the commits page once I commit this. So I'm going to go ahead and hit commit one file. And now over here, you'll see that master is here and the feature branch is here, right? So fork works a little differently to other source control programs. In other source control programs, you'll see this little branch, right? So underneath this all commits section, you'll see this icon. It's like a little alien. That little alien is illustrating this is a commit here, this little node, and then this is a commit here, and this is a commit here. And you'll see that they're parallel, right? So what you want to do is make your changes in parallel so you're not interrupting anybody else's changes, right? So that's what branching is for, is to kind of have your own little sandbox you can work in and make changes to. But you want to get it back to the main or master branch at some point. So to do that, you're going to go through what's called a code review process. So I'm going to illustrate that right now. So let me push this branch.
Yeah, you need to push. The thing that's strange to me right now is I'm not seeing a push for change layout. See how there's no number? But master does have a push.
Right, that's because, oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So if you'll look, where do you see the push?
See,
Oh, okay, yeah.
See how master has one change left to be pushed and change layout has none?
Right.
That's why you're still, because fork does show branches.
Okay.
So I'm not sure what just happened.
No. I made a change that I haven't pushed yet. So Dustin's pointing out that there's a little arrow here. And can you see this? This little 1 with an arrow next to it. That means there's one commit on my machine that hasn't gone to GitHub. You notice how I was looking at GitHub earlier? And it still says color red. Right? But we changed it to Burleywood. So the Burleywood change hasn't made it to GitHub yet, so we need to push that first. And I want to reemphasize, I'm doing this wrong right now. You should never push to master on a team, because that's going to mess everybody up. Nobody's going to have the changes that you just pushed to master, and they're going to have to pull them down and deal with any conflicts that they have with their masters.
Most teams at a job, if you try to do this, it won't let you. It'll send you a nasty message telling you that you don't have permission
Right.
to do this.
But in fork to push, you just push master to origin. And you hit push, and it's going to ask me for my password, I hope. Yeah. So it's pushing my changes. I am completely lost. I am trying to follow along, but I am not keeping up. Okay. Do you have any specifics, Jasmine? Just keep me posted on that, and we'll try and work something out. Okay. So now master is up to date. You'll see that there's no origin master here and a master here. So these are synced. But we also have this feature branch that's not been pushed to the origin. The origin is like where all the code is. There's a central hub that everybody pulls from and pushes to. Right? In a team, in a software team, you've got a central hub repository that everybody pushes and pulls from. Pushes to and pulls from. So to push this branch, you're just going to right click on the branch over here, and you're going to say push feature change layout to origin. So what this is going to do is take my branch on my machine and push it up to GitHub. All right, so we'll push. I'm going to enter my password again because I don't have a key manager set up. So now this little GitHub icon has shown up on this commit. So now that's telling me that this branch is up on GitHub. So if I go to GitHub, I should be able to look at that branch. So if I go to code, you'll see this little icon here that says I'm on master. I can switch branches. So here's a feature change layout branch. And you'll see it's prompting me to do a pull request, to compare and pull request. And what that means is I can take this branch and compare it to what's in the master or main branch and merge it or push the tree back together, right? So this is a branch like a tree. So a tree grows, branches come up and grow all sorts of ways. And then with software, you want it to get back into what's called the trunk, right? So if you think of a tree, normally the branches don't make it back into the trunk, right? But in our case, we want them to get back into the trunk because that's where the software lives. That's where we make changes. That's where the program grows and changes and becomes a working piece of software. So we're going to compare and pull request. Right, so if you look, the commit message we just made with all the list items there. So if you preview this, you'll see it's a bulleted list when I did those tacks, right, the dashes. And that's because, so this is Markdown. This is something you'll work with later, but I just thought it was cool to see like, hey, GitHub is translating my little dashes to dots. That's pretty cool. So we'll create this pull request. So I want to merge one commit into master from feature change layout. So this is where you can look and see the difference. So let's go to files changed. And now we're looking at the same thing we were looking at before, but now it's going to go to master, right? So this is going to get back into our main branch. So if I come back here, I've got my changes all committed. If I go to fork and I check out master again, and I realize I'm taking a lot of time on this, but I want to emphasize Git is an essential piece of any software team in the modern era, or at least source control, right? This is how you make changes on a team. Yes?
So when you create a branch and you just do your own thing there, only you have access to that? Or
No, you can share branches.
everyone can see what you're doing?
So anyone can, so when you have a branch, other people can check it out, meaning that they can go to fork, they can double click on your branch in the origin and will add it to their local, and they can make changes to it. Now the changes that they make on their computer won't automatically show up on the ones that you're doing in your computer, even though you're on the same branch, because you both have copies of it on your computer. Now, when you push, you'll then be on the same branch. You'll be in the same situation as trying to push to master, where two people are pushing at the same time to one branch. So it's good to use communication and say, hey, I'm going to be working on this branch right now. I'm going to be working in this file, and try to segregate your work so you don't have lots of conflicts. come and take your branch, they can make changes and they can push up, they can do that. Now, depending on the company you work for, they can set up permissions so that, you know, if you make a branch, it belongs to you, no one else can look at it except for maybe your tech lead. But that will depend on the permissions. Normally, anyone can just do it. If your repository, anyone who has access to your repository can do it.
So just to reiterate, Dustin was talking about local changes and remote changes. So in Git, we've got that single hub that everyone's pushing to and pulling from. That's called origin in most cases. So that's the single source of truth. So you can make changes on your local that is different from what's on the remote. And you can keep those changes on your machine. You don't have to push those up. But that's the beauty of Git, is you can share those changes in this manner. So let's, I'm going to go ahead and go back to the pull request. And this is where I can say, in the GitHub UI, you can ask for changes. You can click this little button and write comments and say, okay, you know, I don't like hello world. Let's do it in Dutch or Portuguese or something. Or how are we going to make this a global program by saying hello world? You know, that's one thing a lot of companies need, is internationalization. As they go global, they need to be able to translate. So this is not going to scale our hello world program. We can't tell the world hello because it's only in English. We can only tell a large portion of the Western world, but all the Asiatic regions and Australia speaks English.
More or less.
But South America is going to lose out on this. Portions of, large portions of Europe are going to miss out on this program. Africa is going to miss out on this. Large portions of the world will miss out on this program, saying hello world to them and asking their name, because we don't translate anything. So this is, if I were, working on a program to say hello to the world, I would want this changed. But because we're at the early stages of our, program, we'll just go ahead and say it's good. But I can leave a comment and say needs I-18N. We can do that later. So I-18N is internationalization. It's like an abbreviation. We're going to approve it. Pull request authors can't approve their own. That's fine. We'll just merge it. I'm the only one doing this. I can merge my own pull request, right?
You also do need to make one.
Yeah. This is just to show. So when you merge the pull request, what's going to happen is feature change layout is going to go into the master branch. So all the changes that were in feature change layout are now in the master branch. But I haven't pulled the changes from GitHub to my local yet. So I made the changes here. You'll notice I'm still on change color to Burleywood on my local. But I want to pull the latest changes. So to do that, I right click on master and I hit pull. Where's pull? Or fast forward. I guess fast forward is another terminology. Actually, I need to run a fetch. So again, this is a much larger program and is usually used for much larger programs that you're working on. So you're going to run fetch, and this will pull all of the changes from the origin. So now you'll see the merge. See how it's the yellow line did a loop? Can everybody see that on the live stream? How it's a loop? So that's how you make changes in a larger software project without blowing away other people's changes.
So you're doing that in Fork. Can you do that directly in Visual Studio?
Yes, it wasn't working, but Visual Studio Code has similar tools. So you'll have a list of files that have changed. You can stage your changes, you can commit, you can push. So you may not need Fork. Fork is a good way to visualize everything that's going on and kind of see it working as you're moving forward. All right.
Can you, so supposedly like 50 changed, and then I only want half. How do you just select which one you're gonna add to?
You're talking about cherry picking. So you only want certain commits on your branch going into master. Is that what you're saying? Say like,
If you're doing it, it's like you want all, but if someone else needs to approve and push to, and actually add it to the original, like, okay, yeah, that's good. That's not, I don't want that. It makes sense? No.
you don't want somebody reviewing your code?
No. Now, in that I say, like, some companies or some places you're coding a team, and someone's gonna be the leader is gonna say, okay, that's good, that's not good, or something like that. So if you did your thing, and he says, okay, I didn't want that, but I didn't like that, I'm gonna add it to the master, right?
Right. I
So
see.
there's a way that he can just pick like part
No,
of
what
it.
he's going to tell you to do is he's going to say, hey, I want you to change this.
Oh, okay.
He's going to say, remove this part that I don't want, and then resubmit your pull request.
Or
Okay, and then he just pulled the whole thing.
right, right. So you would delete the stuff he doesn't want from your branch.
Okay.
Or
and
change it.
Right, or change it.
Okay.
There's also a way to take just individual commits, but that's a much more advanced way of using Git. We're not going to cover that right now.
And probably, even if he could do that, he's going to ask you to change it because he wants you to be responsible for the thing you wrote. Because he could just never tell you anything, you just take the parts you want, but then you don't realize what you've done wrong or anything you wouldn't learn that way. So they probably want you to take responsibility, and they would say, hey, go back and change the mistakes that you made.
Okay.
Okay. I was hoping to get to functions today, but I don't think we'll get to functions.
I don't think we should. Jasmine is having a lot of trouble still.
Okay.
You may wanna,
Have a Q&A.
That's probably a good.
Just get
right.
a big subject.
It is a massive subject, and I wanted to cover it early, and I didn't want to go super in depth, but it's so essential to working as a software engineer.
I would say that as a junior, people were more impressed that I knew how to use Git than they were that I could code.
Yeah, just to reiterate for
They said we
those
could teach you
online.
code, but it's great that you know how to work with a team already.
Right. For those online, what Dustin is saying is, as a junior, they were more impressed that he knew how to work with Git than that he knew how to code. So because this is the database of the software changes, if you know how to use Git, you're going to be so much more valuable in communicating because you'll be able to go in and look at the database and say, okay, here's where this changed, here's where that changed, here's how I can add this change later. Resolve merge conflicts. That's one of the things. I've seen a grown man slam his hands on the desk and curse because he had a conflict that he didn't feel comfortable merging and getting everything back together. So if you know how to merge code well and do what is called a three-way diff, you're going to be so valuable as an engineer, you don't even know. So I want to reiterate this. I'm spending as much time as I am on this because it is so, so important. And I know a lot of people are lost, so I'll follow up with some of you in the week. Definitely not all of you, but I'll see if I can find some resources that help you go from zero to hero in Git. And we may skip ahead to some of the free code camp resources on Git as well. But this is really going to help. Now, I caveat that with saying, you know all those certifications I was talking about earlier, like ServiceNow and Salesforce? Those can use Git, but they don't generally use Git. ServiceNow has its own way of pushing changes. Salesforce has its own way of pushing changes. But you're still going to have to use those concepts of, I'm making a change, and I want to promote that change to the production environment. I want this software to run. right? So we made this Hello World program last week. You know, we want to push that somewhere and we want to make changes to it. We want to do so in a way that's smart and doesn't break anything. So that's why change management and change control and version control are so important. Dustin, we have any questions from the chat? I know this is...
Just that Jasmine's having trouble. I'm trying to reach out to her in a private message to see if I can help her out.
Okay.
But I haven't gotten any type of response yet.
Okay. So this is where we go back to rule number 1 of the classes. Don't panic. We are here to help. And there's a lot of resources online that we'll reach out to. And again, I'm a practicing Git user, so I am by no means a master, but I have learned how to use this stuff over time, and it will take time for you to learn how to use it. So if you don't get it right away, just keep at it, and you will get it in time.
And nothing else from the questions next week.
Yes, coming with questions next week. You know.
This is probably a dumb question, but is there like a term for when you want to like download or like get the code from GitHub to like your local system?
Yes, that's called cloning.
Line?
So a Git repository is easily distributed, right? So when I can bring up an example that's relevant to us. If you want to see what runs freecodecamp.org, it's open source.
What does open source mean?
It means the code can be downloaded and built by anybody. It is not obfuscated. You can go and get the Free Code Camp website. You can see how Free Code Camp works in this.
See the code itself.
Right, yes. And again, this is a big software project. This makes sense to use Git, right?
And just because a thing is open source does not automatically, although very often, does not automatically mean that it is free for you to just use or take parts of that are proprietary.
Yeah.
Sometimes it means that, but not always. Sometimes people think, oh, I can look at this, so I can use it. That is not necessarily true.
And this is a very complicated repository. But you can download it to your computer and look at it. And it'll open up in Visual Studio Code, and you can see all the different, like...
Oh, this is React.
This is React, yes. So React is something we'll learn later on in the course. And remember, we're going through the summer with this course, so this is just number 2. So keep at it, and we'll be available to walk you through some of the scarier bits, like Git. I feel bad for dumping y'all in the deep end of Git, but it's such an essential part of being a software developer in a team that, because it's easy to write code on your own. You just kind of, copy files wherever you want. It's your computer. You do what you want with it. But by the time you need help with it or like want to build something really big, you're going to need help, and you're going to need to be able to work with others in that regard.
And that's why while you can write and format your code however you like while you're learning, it will be important to learn to format it and make it look correct as quickly as possible. Because if you ever need help from someone, oftentimes if they look at your code and it's just a big mess, they'll just say no. Not because they're being a jerk, but they don't have time to figure out what you've done if it's not formatted correctly, if it's not written in the correct standard. Mostly because they're just passers-by who were willing to help if everything was right, but if it's going to take them a lot of effort, they're not going to.
Okay. Bare minimum in Git you need to know is just how to stage changes. If you can delete and re-download, that's also a good tool. Like there's a
So why don't this is available to everyone, right? Our repository
Correct.
program?
Yes.
Why don't we all clone that?
That's a good exercise.
Then we can practice doing a commit, or making a branch.
Right. So,
So everyone should try to follow what he's doing. As he clones this with fork.
all right. So, oh, Jasmine, I'm sorry. I realized I did not install Git. It was already installed on my laptop, so that's probably why you're having issues.
She hasn't responded.
Yeah.
I've
I hope we didn't frustrate her
I
out.
direct messaged her and I think she's not responding.
Yeah, she's not responding either.
Oh,
But
boy.
usually if you install fork and you don't have Git, it will install it for you.
Okay.
At least that is what I've heard. Macs already come with Git installed, so.
Yeah.
Or at least mine did. My in-1 one.
I'm sorry, y'all. I missed on that totally. You'll need to install Git if you wanna use it. I didn't intend for this to be such a long topic, but it is so important. So let's.
So how do we install Git?
So to install Git, you're gonna download it from git-scm.org. I'll post this link in Slack. I am so sorry, y'all. If y'all don't have Git, you're gonna need Git.
You gotta get Git.
Yeah. And I didn't even go over how to initialize a repository or anything like that. That is
We can do that later. Let's just practice cloning one that already exists.
Jasmine, I can do a one-on-one with you later this week.
She just responded to me.
Yeah.
Apparently, it's possible for us to do
How comfortable do you feel with Git, Caroline?
not in the slightest.
Oh boy.
I can do this.
So Colonel Popcorn or Dustin can do a one-on. Colonel Popcorn.
I would love
Myself or Dustin can do a one-on-one with you.
I would love to help. I just don't feel like I would actually do anything other than confuse.
Right, and there's other YouTube videos as well. Let me go ahead and pull up Git in 100
She
seconds.
just typed it. It also might be Jasmine.
Yeah, is it Jasmine?
Jasmine, that's how it's spelled.
Cool.
What's cool?
Oh, got it.
Okay, good. But to get Git, you'll go to git-scm.org, go to Downloads, go to Windows, and I would download the standalone installer for Windows. If you're on Mac, you probably want to do the standalone as well. But of course, Tim Harper. You'll see a lot of developer tools installed with Brew, so just be aware that Brew exists. It's a way to install things from your command line. That's the way you download for Mac OS. Windows. Yep, that'll work too. That'll just give you a 64-bit installer. It'll try and detect, I don't know if it'll try and detect what operating system you're on, like if it's 32-bit or 64. But then you'll run this installer and it'll install it for you.
And if you're on Mac, it'll just be the universal.
I was just curious, is there like a free alternative to Ford? Because it looks like there's a free evaluation.
No, Fork is free.
Oh,
They want a donation of $50. I 2 years, and every once in a while I'll pop up and say, hey, join this gonna take $50. And I'm like, I am, but no. But they'll let you use it indefinitely.
Oh,
I said the same thing when Malcolm told me to use it, and he was like, what? I had this for like 6 years, what do you mean it's paid? No, it is free, but it will ask you to donate to them or to pay for a $50 license, but they do not care. You just cancel it. Say, no, I don't want this.
Yep, I know this is a lot to take in, and I think I got off on the wrong foot.
I feel
By-
like we forgot to take the first step, we just skipped the second.
Right. We'll see what we can do. I'll see if I can do another. Let me find a good video, and I'll post that on Monday morning. And then if you'll watch that video, that'll show you how to get started. Then we'll go from there. I can't do one-on-ones with everybody, but I can see about getting 1 or 2 folks.
Might be able to, not a one-on-one since there's so many, but might be able to schedule like Zoom call.
Yeah, midweek
share
Zoom call.
screen, and then people can ask questions audibly
Yep.
as you go through things.
Yep. So we may not be able to do one-on-ones with everybody, but we'll get a webcast together. I'll get a webcast together for some time in the week. So I'll push that out in the Slack as soon as I figure out a time that's going to work for me. Before we close for today, I want to see if we can clone the repository. So for the folks that are remote, we'll go a little slower. Has everybody in here installed Git yet? You did? Okay.
if it installs this work, then
You should have one. You got 4.
Do you know his password? Where's it here?
Oh, it locked.
I remember.
That's exactly it. So now if you open Visual Studio Code, or go back to your Visual Studio Code, and in your file menu, go to the upper left, file. Actually, sorry, you're going to go to View tab on the upper bar. And you want to do appearance. Oh, here's a really cool thing. Go to hit the command palette and then search for view. Here it is, developer view. It's gonna basically restart everything. So now on your left-hand side, if you go
You didn't follow the link, is that, or do you have that?
This is not mine. This is
should be able to use it.
Yeah, let me see if I can find that link.
And then what you can do is copy and paste the URL from the Slack.
SCM.com. That is Visual Studio.
So if you open that,
There you go.
there'll be a clone.
Yep, GRT-SCM.com.
Yes.
And then
Into your palette.
download.
Yeah, once you copy it.
Well, he may already have it. Do you have it?
I probably do on this computer. So you install them probably.
I do.
No, you probably don't not.
Okay.
You probably just already had it. You just need to have a fork and everything back and forth installing this. There we go.
Jasmine, have you installed Git yet?
Sorry, I want you to do it so that you get in the habit of going
It's going to be behind a little bit because we're streaming, but
And again, just download button. Drag it over. You can do it. Now hit command space and look for folder.
They actually just brought them around. It was from Valor. They were already set up by the time I got here. I was anticipating having to like walk back and forth and like get all sweaty because it's out there. But I didn't have to do jack did they other than pay. Only do for yeah, easy enough to do. It's very easy.
So like when they're like Texas, not hyphenated, but like going over the
Yo, I just had a bunch of different guys. I've got a bunch of stuff open here. But now we'll run through. Oh yeah, have you started the cloning, like showing how you're doing that yet, John?
yeah. Well, I'm about to. I just want to make sure. I was asking if everyone had Git installed on the remote. We're almost out of time, so we're just gonna skip ahead. So you're gonna download and install Git. You're basically just gonna hit next and yes in Windows. That's fine. You can enable experimental support if you want. So in my case, I already had Git installed, but I'm updating. So this will update and install a new version. This is why I don't usually like to show installs of software because it takes some time. But I realize how important it is. And I apologize for not thinking through what everyone had on their computer already. I'm going to finish by just doing that. Okay, so now I have Git installed on my computer. To clone the repository with fork, I need to go to the link in Slack. So if y'all are watching at home, I'm scrolling up on Slack, and I realize it's going to lag a little bit because we're streaming, but over here, we have this code repository. And once you go to this web page, there's a code button you can click that will bring up a clone menu. You're going to open it with HTTPS, hit Control-C, or you can click this button to copy it. Then you can come over to fork and hit Control-N or go to File, Clone. So what we're going to do is go into our Documents folder, and for the sake of argument, let's say I haven't done this before. I'm going to create a new folder to put this in. call this new projects. And you don't have to call it new projects. You can just call it whatever you want. I usually do documents, projects. But since I've already cloned this repository into my projects folder, I want to show a fresh clone. So we're going to select the new projects folder. This name, you can change it to coding class, or you can just leave it as is. And then you're going to paste the repository URL. So normally it's going to be empty. You paste that in, test connection, hit clone. That's going to pull it down. And then it will open it. And you should see all my commits on there. And that's how you clone a repository. Now you'll be able to make your own changes on master or on a separate branch. Now, if you're on master, you're not going to be able to push them back because actually you won't be able to push them back unless you have a GitHub account, right? Right. So you'll need to sign up to GitHub if you want to make those changes and push them back up. But if you look at the files, you can view. You should be able to view the files, right? Yeah, if you open in File Explorer, you'll see here's the index HTML we were working in and the README Markdown we were working in. Yeah, so instead of a one-on-one, we're just going to do a webcast in the middle of the week. I don't have a tentative idea yet. This will be, yeah, we'll set up a Zoom time. I don't know what my calendar looks like this week. I haven't looked at it yet. I will try to do it sometime in the evening because that works best for me. That's when I'll be most available. I know that may not be when y'all are most available online, but I'll try to set up some time in the evening.
Hey, also for this week only, on Thursday, I can be available during the day.
Okay.
Because I have the day off Thursday, and that never happens, but
Okay.
I also have nothing else to do.
Yeah, I guess I have Monday off as well, but I have a meeting with somebody in the afternoon on that, so we'll go ahead and set a time and hope y'all can attend. It'll probably be sometime in the evening after working hours, so after dinner time. So I apologize if that doesn't work for everyone else, but that's going to be the time when I'm available.
Will you give us time to review this recording?
Yeah, so I'll post the recording in Slack, and y'all will be able to review what I've done. Again, it's not the biggest. You may have to skip around to the end where I tell you how to install Git and then skip back. But if you do that, that should be able to help you sort of follow along with what I was doing in Fork.
Link to the first one as well, the first video?
Yes, I'll post a link to the channel as well, and any new recordings will be on the channel.
Would you be able to set up your project so that it could be pushed to?
That's another topic entirely because GitHub wants you to work with forks. And forks are like copies of the trunk and the main source of truth, and then you do pull requests across forks. So that's a little different. If we're able to get everybody on the same page on the Zoom call, we'll go over how to make changes to the program going forward. And then you can make pull requests during the week as you feel you're able to, and sort of kind of hack on things throughout the week.
Did you get a 403 error even if you have a GitHub account? Posting back to master.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to push back to master.
What if you quickly synchronous and use programs that are needed for it?
So I want to go over, before we stop the stream, I want to go over what assignments would be good to do this week. I know this is in addition to the Zoom call, but hopefully we can fit some stuff in. So let me go to the basic, where's the curriculum? Go here. There we go. That's the one. So we're still in the responsive web design. You should have been able to build the cat photo app. Yeah, for sure. Slack also has an app on your phone for those on the live stream. So if you haven't got Slack on your phone, it's a great way to keep in touch. We're primarily going to be communicating through Slack just because it's kind of a centralized, I don't want to have 100 different email threads that I have to keep up with. So.
Right, because I know what feeling, not what actually happens.
Yeah.
So last week we did, I gave the assignment of running through these self-paced lessons, cat photo app and cafe menu, with a stretch goal of the colored markers. So this week, if you haven't done the colored markers or the other two, go ahead and start working on those. And the last thing we'll do with a stretch goal of getting this certification project done. So once again, last week you should have done these two projects. If not, it's not a problem. These aren't actually important. These just help you learn. The important pieces are the... Yeah, learning's pretty important. You want to learn. That's why we're here. But the certification project is what it's actually going to get you certified. So if you're able to do the survey form this week, that's a good stretch goal. And this is one of those things, they're not going to hold your hand. They're just going to tell you what they want.
Okay.
But if you get this done, you'll have a survey form you can show off to others. And we'll... The other reason why I wanted to get started on Git is you can start deploying your code with GitHub Pages. That's another piece that's useful. And I want to get you feeling like you're accomplishing something and are able to show people, hey, I built a website. It's here on GitHub. You can see the results of your code. But I didn't get to that because we got so bogged down, and I apologize for getting into the weeds without starting from the beginning. So once again, we assigned this cat photo app self-paced and the cafe menu self-paced with a stretch goal of the colored markers self-paced lesson. So this week, if you haven't done the colored markers, start there and do the HTML forms registration form as well. And then a stretch goal of starting on or finishing this survey form project. So this is one of the required projects to earn your front-end web design certification. And it'll look kind of like this. This is what you'll be building.
Which looks scary.
Yeah, and I mean, those self-paced lessons will really help you do those. You can do one in about an hour and a half of dedicated time. I know that's a lot to ask for some folks who don't have that much time. But you can do them in chunks, like 15-minute chunks. You can get a couple of the steps in the lesson done as well. So just doing it 15 minutes at a time, that's kind of how you eat an elephant, is one bite at a time. So those self-paced lessons are really important for learning.
Eat an elephant is what you said?
Yeah, that's how you eat an
I
elephant.
have never heard that saying before, so
Okay.
it caught me very off guard.
I guess it's usually a question. How do you eat it?
How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So how do you learn how to code? One step at a time. And Free Code Camp really breaks down the steps pretty well. And a lot of this cat photo stuff, like it shows a preview in the beginning, I think. Yeah, so this is the cat photo app, right? It's really just an HTML page with no real style to it. And that's not a comment on the relative hipness of the HTML page. It's just it doesn't have any CSS styling. But you'll go through each step. It'll tell you what to do. Like this one will say, "Hey, open an H1 tag. Here's the H1 tag on line 3." You'll see this number right here that says line 3. It says change it from "Hello World." Change the text between the opening and closing tags, right? H1. So it's saying "Hello World." You change it to cat photo app. And that's one thing, Dustin, I apologize and thank you for that. We will try and get some more computers in to loan out. So. All right. So is everyone clear on the assignments for this week? We're just going to kind of work towards that survey form. And as you need to, just go and dip into those lessons to pick up new syntax, new elements, new ways of doing things. All right. Cool. Well, thank you all for visiting this webcast. We look forward to seeing more of you in person when you're able to make it. We're able to provide a little more hands-on help and support and slow down. I can see people's reactions when they're in the room and sort of know when to slow down and when I've missed something very important. So if you're able to make it, we would love to see you. We're at Thrive Co-working and Alpharetta, and we look forward to seeing you either online or in person next week. And I will send out information on the Zoom call on Monday. Whether or not it will be on Monday, it probably won't. So expect like Wednesday time frame. Yeah, Wednesday-ish. All right, thanks everybody.